He was just a pit bull. He goes at you. Didn't back down from nobody. Didn't care who he faced.
Each and every night, he was going to come at your chin. He was going to talk his smack, and he was going to back it up.
I got skills.
Whether you call it the UTEP Two-Step or simply the killer crossover, Tim Hardaway was one of the originators and one of the best. Once he dipped his shoulder, it was a done deal. His crossover could leave the greatest defenders in the dust, and it was his change of pace and quickness that made it so lethal, as he didn't even need to carry the ball to execute it to perfection. He was a compact guard with unexpected strength. His ability to start and stop on a dime, or keep perfect balance as he quickly changed direction, was beautiful. And even though he was small, he never shied away from the big moment. He improved year by year as a star point guard at UTEP, before being drafted by Don Nelson as the perfect player to direct his offense, leading to the Warriors' short-lived Run TMC trio. He was at the top of his game before a knee injury took some of his explosiveness. He would play well upon his return, but his role was soon decreased, and eventually he would be traded to the up-and-coming Miami Heat, where he and Alonzo Mourning would spearhead the turnaround of the franchise. He was part of some great moments in Miami, but also a lot of disappointment. And as his time in Miami went on, he would begin to decline, before spending his last couple years in smaller roles for a few teams. But Tim Hardaway was a nightmare to match up with pre-injury, and reinvented himself to still be an MVP candidate post-injury. Yet he doesn't get as much appreciation as he should. Let's jog your memory. A Chicago native, Tim Hardaway had basketball in his blood. As the son of Chicago playground legend Donald Hardaway, Tim would spend his teenage years playing at Carver Area High School, where although he wouldn't get as much attention as some other players in the state, he was still a great player, as he averaged over 20 points per game as a senior and made it to the championship game. But with that being said, Hardaway may have had a lot of college options had he waited until November of his senior year to sign, but he would instead commit to the University of Texas El Paso in November of his senior year, as they were one of just 2 schools to offer him a full ride at the time. But as Hardaway would later say, he liked the idea of getting away from Chicago and going to many places, which UTEP could offer. Hardaway would join a Miners team led by Hall of Fame coach Don Haskins, as they were a defense-first team with a core full of upperclassmen. So Hardaway would not have a huge role as a freshman, but he would also have to make a lot of adjustments, as the run-and-gun, dribble-heavy style of play that he used in high school was not what Haskins employed. And in addition to that, Hardaway had his own work to do, as he reportedly had one of the ugliest shots you'd ever seen coming out of high school. So Hardaway's freshman year would be a lot of time spent learning, as he would get around 15 minutes per game and have respectable production, while still shooting over 52% from the field, for a Miners team who finished the regular season at 24-5 and would then fight their way through the Western Athletic Conference tournament and eventually defeat Wyoming in the championship by a single point. And they would get an NCAA tournament berth, where they would take on Bradley in round 1. But their season would end quick, as they were defeated easily, with Hardaway seeing minimal playing time and finishing with 2 assists and 4 fouls. But his freshman season would end with him averaging about 4 points, 2 assists, and a steal per game. Hardaway had put in a lot of work and shown a lot of improvement leading up to his 87 sophomore campaign, and in turn he would be named the team's starting point guard. He would become one of 6 players to average double figures, while shooting 49% from the field. But it wasn't just his scoring that showed his greatest improvement. It was how he played the point guard position overall, as he would also lead the team in assists and showed an ability to operate in the half court, while still knowing when he should push the ball in transition. And his two-way ability was also evident in his team-leading 2.2 steals per game, as he would be top 5 in the conference in steals and assists, while being named second team all-WAC. And he was named the MVP of the Sun Bowl tournament. UTEP would start strong, as they were 11-2 about halfway through the regular season, and then they would end on an 8-game win streak, as overall they finished at 22-5. They would defeat San Diego State in the quarterfinals of the conference tournament before falling to Wyoming in the semifinals. But a 23-6 Miners team would get a tournament berth and a first-round matchup versus Arizona. This would be a game to forget for Hardaway, as he had 2 points and 6 assists in just 30 minutes of action, as he would eventually foul out. Yet UTEP would outlast the Wildcats in overtime to advance to a second-round matchup with Iowa. Hardaway would play much better in this game, as he would finish with 11 points on 5 of 7 shooting, as well as hitting his only 3-point attempt, while also dishing 6 assists and committing no turnovers. Yet UTEP would come up just short, losing by 3, as Hardaway's sophomore season had seen him average about 10 points, 5 assists, and 2 steals per game. Going into '88, Hardaway no longer had his backcourt mate from last year in Jeep Jackson, who he wouldn't have anyway as Jackson was a senior last year. But tragically, Jackson was gone as he went into cardiac arrest during a basketball game after the '87 season and passed away. But although Hardaway was likely playing with a heavy heart, he would improve even further as a junior and had another future NBA player on the team showing great improvement in a sophomore Antonio Davis. But Hardaway would up his numbers across the board and would finish as the team's third leading scorer while once again leading the team in assists and steals, as he would also lead the conference in both categories, which helped him earn another second-team All-WAC selection and would again earn MVP of the Sun Bowl tournament. UTEP had been looking good a little over halfway through the season, as they were 15-2 and nationally ranked. But over the final 12 games, they would go just 6-6 to end at 21-8. They would defeat New Mexico and BYU in the conference tournament before falling to Wyoming in the championship. Yet for the third straight year, Hardaway would make an NCAA tournament appearance, this time versus Seton Hall. Yet it would be over as quick as it started, after a huge second half from the Pirates would get them the win, as Hardaway would finish with 12 points and 4 assists on about 46% shooting. But for his junior year, he would average about 13.5 points, 5.5 assists, and 2.5 steals per game. It was more improvement for Hardaway during his '89 senior season, as he would really push himself into the conversation of top NBA prospects. Davis had already worked himself into the role of the second option behind Hardaway, and they welcomed junior transfer Greg Foster. Hardaway would lead the team in scoring on over 50% shooting, as his 22 points per game would be top 3 in the conference. But where his most improvement had been made was in his shooting, as what was once his biggest weakness had become a strength. He would shoot over 36% from deep on 4 attempts per game, so opponents had to respect his range, which made it that much easier for him to blow past defenders. He would once again lead the team in assists and steals, as he would finish top 3 in the conference in assists and first in steals. And this year would get a first-team all-conference selection. UTEP would again have a great first half of the year, going 13-1, but would then go just 9-5 the rest of the way to finish the regular season at 22-6. But Hardaway would end his WAC career on a high note, as after defeating Wyoming and then New Mexico, UTEP would defeat Colorado State to take home the conference championship. The next stop was the NCAA tournament and a first-round matchup with LSU, which would be a great battle between Hardaway and the Tigers' Chris Jackson, as Hardaway would finish with a team-high 31 points to go along with 4 rebounds, 9 assists, and 3 steals, as the Miners would advance to the second round to take on Indiana. But this is where Hardaway's college career came to an end, as they would lose in a blowout, with Hardaway putting up a team-high 20 points along with 4 assists, yet shooting just 9 of 23 from the field. And Hardaway's overall senior season ended with him averaging about 22 points, 5.5 assists, and 3 steals per game. So even though Hardaway hadn't been thinking NBA when he arrived at UTEP 4 years earlier, he was now virtually a lock to be a first-round pick in the '89 draft, after great showings in a couple postseason tournaments. And he was coming out of college a much more polished and complete point guard, with a signature move bearing his alma mater's namesake in the UTEP Two-Step. And about halfway through the first round, Tim Hardaway would become the third point guard off the board. Hardaway would be drafted 14th overall to the Golden State Warriors, who were in need of a point guard. They had a nice surprise the year before, as after a terrible '88 season, they had been able to bring in a great 2-guard through the draft in Mitch Richmond to play alongside their star small forward Chris Mullin. And GM Don Nelson had also taken over as head coach, so the '89 Warriors became one of the league's highest scoring teams and would make it to the second round of the playoffs. But with the run-and-gun style of offense that Nelson ran, he needed a point guard who could push the pace, distribute, and score when needed. And Hardaway was more than qualified, as he was the final piece of the short-lived Run TMC trio. Additionally, the Warriors were welcoming a rookie they had picked up late in the '87 draft in Sarunas Marciulionis, who had been playing in the Soviet Union until this season. So Nelson wouldn't waste any time putting Hardaway to use, as he would begin the season as the starting point guard, wearing an unfamiliar number 5, due to Manute Bol already having number 10. So with the addition of Hardaway, the Warriors now played at the league's highest pace. And although their scoring had dropped slightly from the year before, they were the highest scoring team in the league. Hardaway would finish 4th on the team in scoring, yet would finish 1st in assists and steals, as he would lead all rookies in both categories, while also finishing top 10 in the league in both categories. And he would finish 2nd in scoring to unanimous Rookie of the Year David Robinson. But Hardaway was clearly a star in the making as well, as he would have 60 games in double figures, while recording 27 double-doubles and 3 triple-doubles, as he was named first-team All-Rookie. The Warriors got off to a rough start, as after 18 games they were 4-14, and would feature the worst scoring defense in the league, and they couldn't recover from their bad start, finishing at 37-45 and missing the playoffs, as Hardaway's rookie year would see him average about 14.5 points, 8.5 assists, and 2 steals per game. 1991 would be the peak of Run TMC. Bull was gone, so Hardaway was able to go back to number 10. And with a new number came an even better Hardaway, as he had made huge strides going into year 2. The trio would be the only players to average double figures, as they would combine to put up over 72 points per game, with Hardaway finishing 3rd on the team in scoring. Additionally, Hardaway would lead the team in assists and steals, while finishing top 5 in the league in both categories. So he was really becoming everything you could ask for and more in your point guard. His ability to push the ball, with Mullin and Richmond running alongside him on the wings, would often lead to Golden State turning games into track meets. And although Hardaway had an interesting long-range shot, with virtually no rotation on the ball, he was taking over 3 per game, while connecting on more than 38% of them. So you couldn't really complain, as he would get a spot in the 3-point shootout at All-Star Weekend. He would hit double figures in 79 of the 82 games he played in, while recording 14 games with at least 30 and 43 double-doubles, as he would have a really impressive game in a January 18th defeat of Philly, when he finished with a season-high 40 points and 14 assists, and would also record a career-high 8 steals in an April 3rd defeat of Miami, as he would be recognized as a first-time All-Star. Once again, the Warriors would score at an exceptional pace, but defense was an afterthought, yet they would show improvement over last year and would finish the regular season at 44-38. As they would get a first-round matchup versus the 2-seeded Spurs. The series looked to be going as expected after San Antonio took Game 1, with Hardaway putting up 19 points and 8 assists. But he would improve with each game, as in a Game 2 win, he would have 20 points, 9 assists, and 4 steals. Then would follow that up with 22 points, 8 rebounds, and 11 assists on over 53% shooting in a Game 3 win, before finally putting up a game-high 32 points, along with 9 assists in a Game 4 blowout, to shock the Spurs and take the series. The second round brought Magic Johnson and the Lakers, and although LA would win the series, Hardaway showed that he could hold his own on the big stage against the game's best players, as he would lead the Warriors in scoring, assists, and steals, while shooting nearly 50%, as for the series he would put up averages of nearly 27 points, 13 assists, and 4 steals per game, while also only averaging 2 turnovers. Game 1 would see him put up 33 points and 9 assists on 60% shooting, with just 1 free throw attempt in a loss. The Warriors would squeak out a Game 2 win, as Hardaway finished with 28 points on 50% shooting, along with 14 assists and a postseason career-high 8 steals. A Game 3 loss would see him finish with 24 points and 12 assists, while a Game 4 loss saw him put up 22 points, 9 assists, 3 steals, and 2 blocks. He did all he could to keep the Warriors alive in Game 5, as he would put up 27 points on 50% shooting, while adding 5 steals and a postseason career-high 20 assists. Yet Golden State would fall to LA in overtime, ending their season, as Hardaway's breakout year 2 had seen him average about 23 points, 9.5 assists, and a career-high 2.6 steals per game. But quite unexpectedly, this had been the end of Run TMC. During the second-round series versus LA, the Warriors had been out-rebounded by nearly 13 per game, so Nelson would pull off a trade right before the start of the 92 season, which saw him send a package headlined by Richmond to Sacramento for the rights to rookie Billy Owens, as he liked the idea of adding more size and rebounding to their front line, but also liked the versatility that Owens still offered. But this was a gut punch for Warriors fans, as well as Hardaway and Mullin, as 1991 had really looked like they had something special going, but now it was just the Hardaway and Mullin duo expected to carry the team in 92, but they wouldn't do a bad job at all. The two stars would combine to average 49 points, as Hardaway put up a career-high 23.4 points per game, and they would also get great production from Marshallonis off the bench. Additionally, Hardaway would finish second on the team in steals and first in assists, as overall he would be a top 10 scorer and distributor in the league, with his historic numbers seeing him become just the 6th player in NBA history to average at least 20 points and 10 assists in a season. Hardaway would hit double figures in 78 games, including 17 with at least 30. He would have 43 double-doubles and 1 triple-double. And although Golden State was playing the same way, as the league's highest scoring offense, while allowing the most points, they were winning more than they ever had under Nelson. And although Owens wasn't giving them Richmond scoring, he would turn in a very good rookie season, which saw him finish 3rd in Rookie of the Year voting. The Warriors were 29-15 at the All-Star break, as Hardaway would make his 2nd straight appearance in the game. Then immediately after, they would rattle off 8 straight wins, as overall they would finish the year at 55-27, as Hardaway would be named 2nd team All-NBA. and the 3-seeded Warriors would get a first-round matchup with Seattle. On the surface, Hardaway put up good numbers, leading the team in scoring, assists, and steals. But the Sonics' Gary Payton wouldn't make it easy, as Hardaway would shoot only 40% for the series, while seeing his assists drop by nearly 3 per game, as well as committing over 3 turnovers per game. After 2 games, the series was tied, with Hardaway averaging about 22.5 points and 5 assists on nearly 47% shooting. But then although Game 3 saw him put up 26 points and 8 assists, he would also commit 8 turnovers in a 1-point loss. Then with their season on the line in Game 4, he would have 27 points, 11 assists, and 8 steals, but would shoot 8 of 29 from the field, as the Warriors lost by 3 to end their year, with Hardaway's season seeing him average about 23.5 points, 10 assists, and 2 steals per game. But this would be the high point of Hardaway's time with the Warriors, as injuries would begin taking their toll on the team. Golden State had made a great move in the '92 draft when they selected Alabama's Latrell Sprewell, who looked like a player who could eventually turn into something similar to what Richmond was. But he was one of the few Warriors to have a mostly healthy season. Owens was having a good second year, but from early December to early March, he would appear in just 1 game, as overall he managed 37 games this year due to knee issues. And Majerle would miss the first month and a half of the season. Then in early February, Mullin would tear a ligament in his thumb, which would end his year after playing just 46 games. Hardaway would miss 16 games of his own, but overall would be one of the healthiest starters, as he again finished second on the team in scoring, while finishing first in assists and steals. And his career-high 10.6 assists per game would be the second highest mark in the league, as he would become just the 5th player in history to have multiple seasons averaging at least 20 points and 10 assists. And he would once again be voted an All-Star, as well as be named 3rd-team All-NBA. He would still hit double figures in 63 of the games he played in, as well as 9 games with at least 30 and 41 double-doubles. Additionally, another underrated aspect of Hardaway's game was his rebounding ability, as at just 6 feet, he had averaged nearly 4 rebounds per game over the first 4 years of his career. The Warriors still employed their run-and-gun style, but all the injuries made it a lot more difficult to be effective and consistent, as they would finish at just 34 and 48 and miss the playoffs, with Hardaway's season seeing him average about 21.5 points, 10.5 assists, and 2 steals per game. The Warriors had made some exciting moves during the '93 draft, as after selecting Anthony Penny Hardaway 3rd overall, they would package him to the Magic for top pick Chris Webber, as there was now a lot of excitement around what the Warriors could do during the '94 season. But then just weeks before the season began, it was announced that Hardaway wouldn't be a part of it. During a practice, Hardaway would tear his ACL, which would bring an end to his 5th year before it even started, as Golden State would still finish at 50 and 32 and lose to Phoenix in the first round of the playoffs. So you could only wonder how much better the team could have been with a healthy Hardaway. And if a torn ACL wasn't enough, during the rehab process, Hardaway would develop bone spurs in his knee, which required arthroscopic surgery in June. So even though Hardaway was slated to be ready for the '95 season, he wasn't exactly expected to be the same player. And on top of that, he wouldn't even get a chance to see what he could do with Webber, as after sitting out the beginning of the year, Webber would be traded to Washington for Tom Gugliotta, while Owens was also gone, as he had been sent to Miami for big man Ronnie Cycli. Gugliotta didn't last long, as after appearing in 40 games, he was shipped to Minnesota for Donyell Marshall, and knee issues would limit Cycli to just 36 games. But Mullin would also deal with a knee injury that would delay his season until early January. Then after he came back for 2 games, ankle issues and a fainting problem would hold him out for another 2 months, as overall he would appear in just 25 games. Hardaway and Sprewell would combine for over 40 points, as although he wasn't quite the same player in his first year back from injury, Hardaway was still putting up over 20 a game and would be top 3 in the league in assists. His biggest drawback this year was that he was settling for more jump shots, which is understandable for someone coming back from a major knee injury, as his 42.7% shooting would be a then career low after shooting over 46% from the field across his first 4 seasons. He would also attempt a then career high 7.2 threes per game, yet would connect on nearly 38% of them. He would hit double figures in 55 games and would have 7 games with at least 30, while also recording 22 double-doubles, which would include his career high of 22 assists to go along with 15 points in a December 16th loss to Orlando. And Hardaway had been available, as by early March, he had appeared in every game for the team. But then he started being bothered by his wrist, which ended up being a torn ligament. And after a March 15th win versus the Lakers, he would need surgery, which would cut his year short, as the Warriors finished at 26 and 56 and missed the playoffs. And Hardaway's comeback season had seen him average about 20 points, 9.5 assists, and 1.5 steals per game. Nelson had stepped down as coach and GM during the All-Star break last year, And this year, Golden State had a new coach in Rick Adelman. They had also secured the first overall pick in the '95 draft in Maryland's Joe Smith. Hardaway would begin the season as a starter, as he was putting up pretty good stats on much more efficient shooting over the first month of the year. But then he would be shifted to a bench role in favor of BJ Armstrong, who had been acquired in the offseason. And Hardaway would see his numbers take a significant hit after being shifted to the bench. So now he had went from a star on an up-and-coming team to a much-reduced role on a team who had been going in the wrong direction, as he was reportedly unhappy with his demotion and did not see eye to eye with Sprewell. And with Hardaway now at 29 years old, he wasn't getting any younger. And at some point, he had been talking to new Miami Heat center Alonzo Mourning, and had told Mourning to put in a good word for him with the Heat's new coach and team president, Pat Riley. So at the '95 trade deadline, Hardaway would get his wish. The 24 and 29 Heat had acquired Hardaway in a steal of a trade, as he would immediately be reinstalled as a starter on a team who played much differently than the playstyle which Hardaway had become accustomed to in Golden State, as the Heat would emphasize defense and play at a much slower pace. But this pace may have been just what Hardaway needed to preserve his knees and allow him to return to the league's elite. He would play and start in 28 of the team's final 29 games and put up great numbers, as he would record 15 double-doubles with Miami. And the addition of Hardaway was enough to help the Heat go 18-11 the rest of the way, and their 42-40 record would get them the final playoff spot in the East. Riley had been making multiple trades to free up cap space to take runs at free agents in the offseason. So these Heat didn't have a lot of depth and were taking on the 72-10 Bulls. And not surprisingly, Chicago barely broke a sweat in a sweep. Hardaway was one of 2 Heat players to average double figures, but with the other players struggling to score, he would average less than 6 assists per game. He started strong with 30 points, 7 assists, and 3 steals on over 63% shooting in Game 1, although he would commit 9 turnovers. But this would be his high point, as the following 2 games would see him average just 11.5 points and 5 assists on about 33% shooting. But Hardaway's overall season would see him finish with averages of about 15 points, 8 assists, and 1.5 steals per game. So even though the season ended quickly, Hardaway was in a much better situation, and his first full year in Miami would be one of the best of his career. Over the offseason, Riley would sign both Dan Marley and PJ Brown to contracts. His biggest splash was supposed to be Juwan Howard, but the Heat had failed to account for performance bonuses in their salary cap, which put them over the limit, so the deal that was all but done would end up being terminated, as Howard would remain in Washington. The Heat were looking a lot better in '97, featuring a top 3 scoring defense. Marley would be limited to just 36 games due to a back injury, but due to the Heat being 25-10 when he went down, and then soon after going on an 11-game win streak, Riley knew they needed to try to win now. So he would trade for the Mavs' Jamal Mashburn in the midst of their win streak on February 14th, as Mashburn would become the third option. Hardaway would play and start in 81 games, as for the first time in his career he would lead his team in scoring, while also once again leading his team in assists and steals. And he would finish top 10 in the NBA in assists, as not only would he make his return to the All-Star game, he would earn his only first-team All-NBA selection, and would even finish 4th in MVP voting. He would have 74 games in double figures, and 25 double-doubles. And he would also score his career high of 45 points, to go along with 7 rebounds, 7 assists, and 4 steals in a March 7th win versus Washington. So the Heat spent the majority of the year near the top of the East, as by season's end, they were 61-21, and would have the 2 seed going into a first-round matchup with Orlando. This series would go the full 5 games, as Hardaway struggled, never once shooting over 39%. And committing nearly 4 turnovers per game. However, he would still record double figures in each game, as well as 3 double-doubles. And although Game 5 was one of his worst, with 11 points and 11 assists on 5 of 20 shooting, he would hit a dagger 3 late in the 4th quarter to give the Heat a 6-point lead with about 14 seconds left, as they would win to advance to a second-round matchup versus New York, as a rivalry was about to be born. Hardaway would put up 21 points and 6 assists in a Game 1 loss. But then Miami would even the series after Hardaway put up a game-high 34 points along with 8 rebounds and 4 assists. They would fall behind 2-1 after a Game 3 loss in which Hardaway finished with 17 points on just 6 of 22 shooting and 8 assists, but would also have 6 turnovers. Game 4 would end in another loss, as Hardaway again had 6 turnovers, and this time just 14 points and 3 assists. So now it wasn't looking good for Miami, as they were down 3-1. Hardaway's struggles continued as he would put up 16 points on just 3 of 17 shooting in Game 5, but Miami's defense would hold New York to just 81 points, as they would win easily. But late in the game, PJ Brown and Charlie Ward would get tangled up after a Hardaway free throw, which led to Brown flipping Ward and a fight breaking out, which saw a lot of the Knicks' key players leave the bench, resulting in Allen Houston and Patrick Ewing being suspended for Game 6, as well as Larry Johnson and John Starks being suspended for Game 7. And Hardaway knew he had to capitalize on this advantage, so Game 6 would see him put up 20 points, 8 assists, and 3 steals with no turnovers as they won by 5. Then in a do-or-die Game 7, Hardaway would put together one of the most memorable and clutch performances of his career. He had a modest start, as at halftime he had 13 points and 5 assists, yet the Heat were up 17, but he would catch fire in the third, as he would have 18 of Miami's 22 points in the quarter, and then would add 7 more points in the fourth, as the second half had seen him score 25 of his postseason career-high 38 points on 8 of 11 shooting, and for the game he would drain 6 threes, while adding 7 assists and 5 steals, with Miami winning by 11 to advance to a conference finals matchup with Chicago. But once again, Chicago would end their season. Hardaway couldn't carry over his hot hand, as over the first 3 games he would only average about 11 points and 5 assists, while also only shooting about 28% from the field. As Miami went down 0-3, he would play well in Game 4 with 25, 6, and 7 on over 47% shooting, as Miami would avoid the sweep. But then even though Hardaway went for 27 and 5 in Game 5, Chicago would win easily to advance, as Hardaway's first full season in Miami had seen him average about 20.5 points, 8.5 assists, and 2 steals per game. Miami would start the 98 season without Mourning, as a knee injury kept him out of the team's first 22 games. They would go 15-7 without him, and then in mid-February they would lose Mashburn for the remainder of the regular season with a thumb injury. Hardaway was healthy and would be the team's second leading scorer, while leading the team in assists and steals. He would hit double figures in 77 games, while recording 3 games with at least 30 and 35 double-doubles, as he would be named second-team All-NBA and earn his final career All-Star selection, while also finishing 6th in MVP voting. But even with the injuries they dealt with, they were still able to put together a 55-27 record, which would get them a first-round matchup with New York. However, the Knicks were out for revenge. This should have been a lock for Miami, as Patrick Ewing missed the whole series with a wrist injury, but it would instead go the distance. Hardaway came out on fire, as he put up a game-high 34 points with 6 made threes in a Game 1 win, but would then have just 15 points on 4 of 15 shooting in a Game 2 loss. Yet over the next 3 games, he would average 27 points while shooting over 48% from the field and 40% from deep. He would have 27, 5, and 7 in a Game 3 win, then would put up 33 points along with 9 assists in Game 4. Yet Miami would lose, and with less than a second remaining in Game 4, with New York on the verge of winning, Mourning and Knicks forward Larry Johnson started throwing punches, which led to both players being suspended for Game 5. So while this was a blow for both teams, Miami without Mourning was a much weaker team. And it was clear in Game 5, as the Heat were blown out by the Knicks in Miami, with Hardaway putting up 21 points and 8 assists, while only shooting 8 of 20 from the field, as his year would end with him averaging about 19 points, 8.5 assists, and 1.5 steals per game. 99 brought the lockout shortened season, and although Hardaway's production was similar, there were some signs that he was on the decline. He would again be the team's second leading scorer, as well as their leader in assists and steals, but his 7.3 assists and 1.2 steals were a then career low, and he would only shoot 40% from the field. He would hit double figures in 43 games, but would have just 5 games with at least 10 assists, but he would still be voted second team All-NBA. The often injured Mashburn would only appear in 24 games, as the Heat put up 6 less points per game than they did in 98, but they would also allow 6 less points, as Mourning would win his first career Defensive Player of the Year award, and the Heat would finish at 33-17 to get the top spot in the East, where they would once again take on the Knicks in the first round. But like last year, they would lose in 5, as Hardaway would have a series to forget. He would have just 2 games in double figures, while shooting only about 36%, and would go 5 of 25 from deep, while committing over 4 turnovers per game. Prior to Game 5, each game had been decided by at least 10 points. Yet with seconds left in this game, the Heat were up by just 1, and then an Allen Houston shot would sink Miami, as they would again lose to New York on their home court, with Hardaway's regular season seeing him average about 17.5 points, 7.5 assists, and 1 steal per game. But as a new millennium came, it became more obvious that Hardaway was slowing down. Hardaway had played through knee pain all of last year and would opt for off-season surgery to repair some cartilage damage. He was in the lineup to begin the year, but he would be hampered by his knee all year, only appearing in 52 games and seeing his scoring and efficiency continue to drop. yet he would maintain solid assist numbers, again leading the team. Overall, he would hit double figures in 37 games and record 9 double-doubles. And luckily for Miami, they would get another great year out of Mourning, as he would repeat as DPOY. And for the first time since acquiring him, they would get a healthy season from Mashburn. And while maintaining their top 5 scoring defense, they would finish with a 52-30 record to get a first-round matchup with Detroit. This would be a relatively easy sweep for Miami, as Detroit's Grant Hill would only appear in 2 games and wasn't playing at 100%. But someone was missing on Miami's side, as Hardaway would sit out the series with a sore foot. But I'm sure you can guess who was waiting for Miami in round 2. For the 4th straight season, the Heat and the Knicks would meet in the playoffs. Hardaway would play and start all 7 games, but he wasn't at full strength, as he would only manage about 26 minutes per game while recording less than 8 points and 5 assists on 29.4% shooting. The series would again go the distance, with one of Hardaway's best performances coming in Game 7, when he had 15 points and 7 assists, yet he would shoot just 6 of 20. And then a last-second Clarence Weatherspoon miss would lead to Miami losing the game by 1, to again see their year end at the hands of New York, as Hardaway's season had seen him average about 13.5 points, 7.5 assists, and a steal per game. Hardaway would have something to celebrate over the summer, as he and Mourning would suit up for the US Olympic team at the Sydney Summer Olympics, where they would win the gold. But the Heat were going to get some crushing news shortly after.
Good evening, everyone. The announcement leaving South Florida and Heat fans everywhere stunned.
Alonzo Mourning will not be playing professional basketball this season.
Over the offseason, Mourning was diagnosed with a serious kidney disease and would be ruled out for the entire year, so it looked like Hardaway would have higher expectations. But Riley would also make some changes, as he would package Mashburn and PJ Brown in a trade to the Hornets, which saw the Heat get back Eddie Jones and Anthony Mason. And Riley would also work out a 3-team trade, which saw them receive big man Brian Grant from Portland. So they had been able to cover the lost production from Mourning pretty well. And Hardaway had also signed a 1-year, $12 million extension, which had made him the highest paid point guard in the league for 2001. However, about half of his money was dependent on him keeping himself at a certain playing weight. But he would play well. He would appear in 77 games, getting nearly 34 minutes per game, and would bump up his scoring. And although his assist numbers dropped, he would still lead the team. But as he continued to slow down, he couldn't rely on his trademark quickness to get to the hoop like he once did, as this would be his 2nd straight year shooting below 40%. But he would still have 59 games in double figures and record 6 double-doubles. Additionally, Mourning would defy the odds to return in late March and help the Heat go 8-5 in their final 13 games, to end the year at 50-32 and get a first-round matchup with Charlotte. But Hardaway's foot was bothering him again, as he would average just 18 minutes over the first 2 games while barely producing, before sitting out Game 3 of an embarrassing sweep at the hands of the Hornets, as his regular season would end with him averaging about 15 points, 6.5 assists, and a steal per game. So Hardaway had meant a lot to this era of Heat basketball, but in late August, his time in Miami would come to an end. On the 22nd, he was sent to Dallas in a sign-in trade, where he would be expected to back up Steve Nash on a Mavs team who also featured Dirk Nowitzki and Michael Finley, as he was also being reunited with his one-time Golden State head coach. Hardaway would say that he enjoyed what he was a part of in Miami, but also that he didn't feel respected or taken care of, as even when he did receive new contracts, they would have strict incentives, such as Hardaway maintaining a 3-to-1 assist-to-turnover ratio, as well as Miami needing to win at least 45 games. In Dallas, Hardaway would come off the bench behind Nash, and although his efficiency continued to drop, he was still giving the Mavs close to 10 points and 4 assists. But after appearing in 54 games, he would be included in a package to Denver around the trade deadline, going from a winning situation to one of the league's worst teams. And his time in Denver would be memorable for one moment, as after being ejected for his second tech during the 3rd quarter of a March 15th game versus Orlando, Hardaway's frustrations would lead to him throwing a TV monitor from the scorer's table onto the court, leading to a 2-game suspension. But the Nuggets would finish at 27-55 and miss the playoffs, as Hardaway's overall season would see him average about 9.5 points, 4 assists, and a steal per game. Denver would waive Hardaway shortly after the season, and he would remain unsigned until late March, when he agreed to a deal with Indiana for the remainder of the year for some backcourt depth, as he would appear in 10 of their final 11 games. And after a 48-34 finish, the Pacers would get a first-round matchup with Boston, where Hardaway would have a good Game 5 with 13 points and 6 assists in a win. But he wouldn't do much else, as Indiana would lose in 6 games. And his brief time in Indiana had seen him average about 5 points, 2.5 assists, and a steal per game. This had marked the end of Hardaway's career, and he would eventually be a 2022 Hall of Fame inductee. But this was after a long road of rejection and redemption, as he would miss the cut 5 times before being elected. But he had also spent years rebuilding his image, as in 2007, he had made some negative comments towards gay people during a radio interview, in response to former player John Amici coming out as gay. Hardaway would soon apologize for what he said, but the damage was done. Yet in the years following, he would rebuild his image, and would even be the first to sign a petition to allow same-sex marriage in the state of Florida. Tim Hardaway is still one of the greatest little men of all time. He continually improved at UTEP until he was a first-round pick to the Golden State Warriors. His speed, quickness, floor vision, and killer crossover made him the perfect fit to headman Don Nelson's offense. The brief Run TMC era was exciting, but the years after brought a down period in Golden State full of injury, and Hardaway's would be one of the worst. But prior to that, he was already one of the league's best point guards on a historic pace, and would come back at near the same level. He would get a new opportunity in Miami and showed he could slow it down and operate just as well in the half court, as he put together a couple of his best years and had great team success. However, these seasons would often end in disappointment, and his declining knees would gradually reduce his effectiveness until he ended with a couple uneventful years. But Tim Hardaway could score and pass with the best of them. He had an incredible first step, deceptive strength, and some of the best balance of any player ever. And he maximized these gifts, among others, to produce over a decade of high-level play. And his killer crossover was the blueprint for so many players after him, yet his remains the most pure. But that's it for today's episode on Tim Bug. Hope you enjoyed it, and make sure to subscribe for more videos like this one. If you liked it, check out these two on a couple of his Golden State teammates. Thanks for watching, and see you next time.